Welcome to the 12th episode of When Life Hands You Lemons. And in this episode, I have the founder of KDMR Music and the Music Business Streams podcast, Mr. Brandon Jackson. Before I get started and we kind of kickstart this episode, I want to remind you of signing up to my mailing list, as it notifies you when new episodes are live, and it also features some tips and tricks that I've learned along the way to help you guide your career in the music industry. I also want to talk a little bit about Patreon and how that you can use that to support me and the podcast, as the money that I make through Patreon goes directly into the podcast. I also want to encourage you to rate this podcast on Apple Podcasts or any other podcasting platform that you listen to, whether it be Google Podcasts, on Spotify. I don't believe Spotify allows ratings, but subscribing and liking does help, or any other podcast platform that you listen to the show on. Also, or lastly, I have a guest request form. So if you or somebody you know is a music industry or music business professional or entertainment business professional, there's a link in the description that you can send them. It's the guest request form. It's a link to a Google form where they'll fill it out, and I'll go through it and determine if they're a good guest on the podcast, and then I will reach out to them. So if you or somebody you know would be a good guest on the show, please let me know and then send them that link so that they can fill it out and we can get connected and hopefully have them as a guest on the show. Okay, so with all of that mumbo jumbo out of the way, this episode is with, like I said, Mr. Brandon Jackson, and he is a music marketing guru, in my opinion. He has started his KDMR Music back in 2011, and it's a consulting educational platform for music industry professionals, specifically for artists, to help them grow their brands, market their music, and just educate them about the music industry. We talk a little bit about how Brandon got his start in the industry working with Ninth Wonder and at Jamla Records. He talks a little bit about making beats and writing his own music, and he talks a little bit about his book as well. So at the end of this episode, there's a little bit of a coupon. So if you want a discount on Brandon's book, I would encourage you to listen through the end of this episode, and I will share with you the code for you to enter when you purchase the book, and you'll get a 50% discount on the book. So without me giving away too much information, I'll let Brandon tell his story. Welcome again to this week's episode, and please enjoy this episode with Mr. Brandon Jackson. Why don't you just start by kind of telling us a little bit about yourself, who you are, where you got your start, and what drives your passion to be in the music industry?
Okay, sure. So my name is Brandon Jackson. I am the founder of KDMR Music. That is an artist education platform. Basically, we teach up-and-coming artists all of the basics of the music industry. And then once they have that down, we teach them how to market themselves and their music to find their audience so they can build a successful career. In a nutshell, that's what I do.
Okay, yeah, cool. Yeah, and I've been following you for a while, so you've done a really good job on your videos and things like that, so it's kind of fun to watch, and I always learn something from you. So I was reading on the form that you had submitted that you got your start kind of was it Jamla Records with Ninth Wonder?
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about how that came about and some things that you learned during that internship.
Sure. So prior to that internship, my only experience in music had been, pursuing a career as an artist. And I guess a career in as much as I'm a college student rapping to my college friends. And I became a fan of Ninth Wonder because we got connected on Facebook, like his personal page. We were friends. And through that, I kind of discovered the label that he was starting. Jamla started in 2008. And that's kind of when we became Facebook friends. But it didn't really take off until about 2011. And that's when I landed the internship. So what happened is his flagship artist is named Rhapsody. she was on Kendrick Lamar's To Pimp a Butterfly album, the only feature there. So that's where most people will probably know her from. But at the time, they were releasing these mixtapes for free, like every couple of months or so. And so Jamla had, at its peak, I think like 11 rappers, and then there's a team of 7 producers on the label as well. So they were constantly putting out projects online for free download. And I became a fan. I was just consuming as much content as I can, because college students have time for that. Right. And, and so
Absolutely.
I went to a show. They had a show in Greensboro, and that's where I went to college, Greensboro, North Carolina. And at the show, they're selling merchandise. They're selling CDs and T-shirts and hats and stuff like that. I bought a T-shirt. I bought a poster. I bought a CD that was signed. And I remember I spent like $50 on top of the admission to the club that the show was at. And I remember feeling like at the time, okay, if they got me this excited to where I spent money on things that I technically already had, already had all the music, then this is something, and I want to find a way to be involved. So my degree was in marketing anyway. I'd already done some graphic design work for, kind of larger companies. The biggest project I'd had up until then was a press kit for LaLa Anthony, Carmelo Anthony's wife. She was basically trying to start an acting career, and I was able to design some press materials for her that helped her land her agency relationship. And so I'd had experience in marketing, but mostly from the design perspective. My role at Jamla was as a marketing and operations intern. And so basically from that show, that I'd seen tweets about the internship opportunity. It was a remote internship. And so from that show, I'm like, okay, I want to be involved. So I went and applied. And funny story, so I applied and I heard nothing about this internship. And so I just assumed I didn't make it. Well, Ninth Wonder has a documentary called The Wonder Year that he released around that same time. And so he was doing screenings. He did a screening in his hometown of Winston-Salem, which is about 20 to 30 minutes from Greensboro. But I had zero money. So I borrowed some money from my friend, filled up my gas tank, drove to Winston-Salem, and met Ninth Wonder for this live screening. So after the movie plays, I met him and the director of the film. And so I told him, I'm like, hey, I'm Brandon. I applied for the internship. These are some of my ideas. And we talked for like 30 minutes just outside on the street. One of my friends actually took a picture of us talking. So it's cool that I have that moment. And so basically he was like, look, well, I have to go, but we're going to talk about that marketing stuff. And the next week, I was offered the internship. And so I spent about 2 years working with them remotely. And through that experience, I was able to travel with them. We went to A3C each year in Atlanta for the music festival. So I was selling merch for them. I got to plan out social media campaigns for their releases. I got to implement a contest for Rhapsody when her debut album came out in 2012. I'd say the biggest lesson that I learned throughout that time was, one, just how much work it takes to build a successful career. Even if you already have some level of fame or recognition. Ninth Wonder was a Grammy Award-winning producer before all of this started. And he had this constant struggle to get attention for his artists and for them to be taken seriously. And so I saw the struggles that they went through to garner attention. But then on top of that, there was this added stigma because Rhapsody was a female rapper. And, she's not, taking her clothes off like some other rappers would. So she had a very hard time building a following. It's very grassroots, her movement was. And so it showed me up close and personal, how much work, how much groundwork it takes to build those one-to-one fan relationships that you're required to make if you want to build a successful career. So that was the biggest lesson I took away. But then the other was when we were traveling, seeing some of the other artists and how discouraged they got by the opportunities that they weren't afforded. Because, for as hard as Jamla label artists had, they had it a tad bit easier compared to their peers because they had the cosign of a famous producer. So I was able to see the flip side of that and really sympathize with the artists and their struggle. And that's basically what inspired me to move on to the things I'm doing now.
Wow, that's kind of quite a story. And I like how you said that initial spark kind of kicks off. Like you said, you didn't have any money, but you had that determination to take that internship. And that was something you were very passionate about, and you wanted to take that and run with it. So you found a way to do that. And I see that with a lot of people in the music industry is they just kind of take things at face value. If somebody tells them no, they just take it as what it is. But the people that really stand out are the ones that they're not going to take no for an answer. They're going to find 3 other ways that'll work. And you found a friend that was, willing to loan you some money so you could drive up, and look how it turned out and kind of kickstarted your career. So aside from that, after that internship, where did you kind of go from there? What was your next step? What did you have plans after you wanted to go, after the internship, or what was kind of your next step after that?
Yeah, I didn't really have plans. I think going into the internship, I thought I was just going to be like this star and they were going to hire me full time, and that was going to be, my story. That's not what happened. Spoiler alert. But what happened was, while I was in Atlanta for the music festival, I met a girl. She's like, it's a music festival, so there's all sorts of little things going on. So someone just started a random rap cipher. And so I met this girl who, she was actually one of the members of the street team for Jamla. So she was there trying to meet everyone. But I guess technically I was a step above her. So it was kind of my job to look out for her and some of the other street team members. But she gets in the cipher and she's rhyming. And I'm like, wow, she's really good. And so as it happened, I ended up having to drive her back from Atlanta to North Carolina. So that's a 6-hour car ride, if anyone's not familiar. So we got to know each other. She hadn't really started a career in music at the time. She was just kind of doing it as a hobby. And so we shared some of our goals. And she goes, well, if I ever do take this music thing seriously, I'd love for you to be my manager. Now, granted, I'm a senior in college at this time. I really don't know what I'm doing. But I'm like, that sounds cool. I'm committed to learning. So I signed on as her manager, and the way most managers start, you're the best friend manager. It's how some people put it, where you don't have the connections, you don't have the money or resources, but you're determined to make things happen for your friend because you believe in their music. So that was me. And that's when I started KDMR Music. It was actually KDMR Management. And that was just the vehicle that I would use to send emails on her behalf. And that relationship lasted for about 5 years, actually. But through that experience, I graduated college. My plan was to move to New York to be closer to the actual industry. But that kind of fell through. So when I realized that I was going to be in North Carolina for more of a long-term thing, I decided to go back to school. So I enrolled in Berklee Online in their music business program. They actually have a master's degree program now with a music business concentration. So I enrolled in school, and my thought process was, okay, well, if I can't be near the industry, then at least I can get some credentials behind my name so that someone sees me, they'll take me seriously. So I enrolled in that program, took a few classes, and realized the industry was changing way faster than college curriculum were being written. I took a class about music marketing with Topspin, which is a direct-to-fan platform, if people aren't familiar with that. And in the middle of the class, the semester, Topspin got acquired by Beats Music. And then a few months later, Beats Music got acquired by Apple. And then Topspin kind of shut down for a little while their intake. So it's like we just spent all this time learning this system and now it's obsolete. And so that was a catalyst for me to say, all right, I'm done paying money to this institution. Let me just learn as much as I can learn, from whatever books I can find, whatever people I can find that are willing to mentor me, and, whatever I can find on YouTube. And that's kind of been what's driven me up until now. That was 2013 when I dropped out of school. And it took me about 2 or 3 years to really, I ended up taking on another management client in that between time. But 3 years later, here I am giving out the knowledge that I, acquired myself.
Right. So you said prior to the Berkeley, you had a college degree, correct?
Yes.
What was that degree? And it was marketing?
It was a marketing degree. I graduated in 2012.
Okay. That's what I thought. So after you kind of talked a little bit about it, but what during your management, regardless prior to school, and even after school, what were some things that you had learned, and what are some things just by doing it yourself?
Mm-hmm.
What are some things that you learned? What are some things that you thought would work and didn't? What are some failures that you learned from it? Because I think artist management is very, very difficult.
Yes.
It's basically business management, but it's on a personal level.
Right.
I mean, you're literally managing somebody's personal life.
Right.
So what are some things that either artists should consider when they're looking for a manager? What are some things that managers should consider when working with an artist? What are some of those kind of lines?
Yeah, and so, I kind of touched on this earlier, but I was the best friend manager.
Right.
We were friends before we were business partners.
Right.
And that presents a unique situation anyway, because, your friend, you want to see them succeed. And then you may have some business knowledge, or maybe you don't. In my case, I didn't when I started. I had a little because of my internship. But management is managing business, it's managing relationships, and it's managing emotions all at the same time. And that is a very difficult balancing act, especially if you don't have skin in the game. I think the best managers are able to say, from my experience doing this, and this is the best path forward for you, right? The other challenge to artist management is no matter how, fervently you feel about something, no matter how much you're committed to something, it's the artist's decision. You work for the artist. It's not about what you think. And, I would deal with these situations where, the biggest opportunity I saw starting out was the internet and direct-to-fan platforms. One thing I learned from my internship experience was the power of building those grassroots relationships, one-to-one relationships with fans. And that's kind of what carried Rhapsody. She was able to quit her full-time job long before she saw any real mainstream success. And that was through performing at live shows and things like that. But because she, built that genuine relationship with her fans, she was able to do that. But a lot of artists feel like their only path to success may be through a label or through a certain gatekeeper. And so they'll do all these things trying to attract the attention of those stakeholders and those gatekeepers in the industry. But they don't have the systems in place to really benefit from that, right? Like you're a publicist, for example. I'm sure you get pitches from people all the time who are nowhere near ready for the spotlight that you could put on them. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so what I feel like is the best thing to do is, we're in the age of the internet. You can literally start a business overnight if you want to. Mm-hmm. You can put your website up. You can get e-commerce platforms in place. You can start a business that's operational and that brings in revenue from day one. Then when you go out and pitch to a publicist and they decide to review your track, you have a way to benefit from that. You can make money. And more important than making the money, you can track where it came from and you can articulate to someone else who may hold a higher position where it came from, why it worked, and what you guys can do moving forward. So then it becomes not this thing where you are the needy hand, but you guys can honestly be business partners and you can find things that are mutually beneficial. Mm-hmm. That was the biggest thing that I tried to instill in my artists. But the hard part, again, is managing those expectations. Building a grassroots fan platform is not easy. It's not glamorous. It doesn't involve getting your hair and makeup done and just showing up on the set of a video shoot. Like there's a lot of hard work involved. And if artists don't understand that, they can be discouraged to move forward. And that's that constant battle that you face as an artist manager, trying to manage their emotions, keep them excited, but make them do things the right way, so to speak. You can't make anyone do anything, but for lack of better terminology.
Right. And managers kind of act as a therapist in some ways as well.
Right.
Because the music industry can really rip apart somebody. We've looked at what it's done to some of the biggest stars in the industry. It just completely destroys them, and they don't have that mental stability that they need to continue on, to keep doing what they're doing. And they're so incredibly talented, but it's the mental health starts to deteriorate. So you have to really be wary of all kinds of different things, from what they look like, what they're wearing, what they're saying, and all the way down to their mental health.
Right.
Oh, kind of coming back a little bit about, you had talked about prior to, I believe it was your internship, you had talked about rapping. Do you still do any of that? Are you still actively writing music, your own music, or do you kind of strictly do kind of the business side, the back end side of educating people?
I do make beats as a hobby. I think pursuing a career as a solo artist is just kind of counterproductive to the other things that I'm doing. Now, you'll see if you're following me on YouTube or the podcast, I do different things. I kind of experiment with things myself to report back to my audience, how it works. Like right now, I'm testing out Spotify's playlist pitching feature in the Spotify for Artists dashboard. So I do things, but not in an active pursuit of any type of career. I just do it because it's fun to do.
Okay. So, I remember what my question was. When you touched a little bit about it, but building the grassroots connections you need with people and fans. And I've heard time and time again, and I've seen it time and time again, where artists are kind of passive. Some artists are very passive with their followers, and some are very, very involved with their followers. They're engaging with them, whether it be on social media or whether it be during a show. So can you kind of dissect that a little bit and talk a little bit more about how important it is to connect with your fan base instead of just use them as numbers to pitch to potential investors, to labels, to publicists, to publications, things like that?
Yeah, and I think the example I give in my book is, how do you get to a super fan? How do you make a connection so deep that the person on the other side would spend, loads of money on you, right? And that sounds like a really capitalist way to look at it, but what we're doing is relationship building, and that's something I learned firsthand from my internship with Ninth Wonder. They didn't take any fan for granted. I would watch them sit on Twitter for hours, and what they would do is they would search their names and see like who was mentioning them in a good way and just say thank you, or they'd retweet them. And what you would notice immediately after is whether you've got some people who aspire to be artists and they would like pitch their own music after that, or you've got people like, oh my God, Ninth Wonder retweeted me, There's something about that relationship where, because this is the thing I try to instill in artists, not everyone can make music. Like, you're special just in the fact that you can play an instrument, you can sing, you can rap, right? And that's not something that's accessible to everyone. So if you take your time out of your day to acknowledge a fan, they're already looking at you as a special person. Like, wow, and this person that makes these cool things that I relate to also took time to speak to me. They noticed me. One of the greatest human needs is for acceptance. A lot of people are listening to you because you're cool. They can identify with you. Their friends think they're cool because they listen to you. How much cooler do their friends think they are when you talk to them, right? Mm-hmm. Like you'll see like on some of these fan accounts, and it'll be like, it's like a Nicki Minaj fan account, and they'll say, oh, Nicki retweeted me on this date. Or I've seen people that have gone backstage and met an artist, they'll say, oh, met Chris Brown on this date. Like, it's super important to them. And so if you can take the time to make their lives better forget how much money it might make you. Why not do that? Isn't that why we all create art in the first place?
Absolutely. Not only that, it's about being a good person too.
Yeah.
Just don't let it speaks to me when I meet somebody that I look up to, and they're not a jerk. They're not rude, they're not disrespectful. They're relatable. And I've met quite a few artists like in person to do interviews, and they're very successful. And one of them was Morgan Page. I got to meet him in person. He's huge. He's been doing music for many, many years. And I met him, and he was such a super cool guy. He was so down to earth. Granted, he was busy, so we were kind of in a hurry. It was like a half hour before he went on stage. But it was just, he was such a down to earth person. And that to me speaks more than if I were to meet somebody that was rude and kind of passive and be like, oh, this is another interview type thing. They're willing to take the time to do it. And that means a lot, from a professional standpoint and a personal standpoint. So I can imagine how important it is to build those relationships with people and your fans specifically.
Yeah. I think it's harder for artists to do that sometimes, though, because we're sold this dream that, you're going to make it to a level where all you ever have to do is sit in a room with a guitar and write music. And so artists are annoyed that they have to spend time on social media or they have to show up for this interview, you know. But again, if you're a genuine person, a good person, those things will shine through. And the people that you meet will be even more greatly affected by your presence and by your personality. And it works wonders in your business, especially on the independent side, where every fan counts.
Absolutely. And I think once you build that connection and it becomes kind of second nature, you just do it naturally. I think the money and the success and the fame will just kind of come naturally. And that's with any business, though. That's with any business. If you're going to focus on just getting the numbers, it's going to be much more difficult. If you just focus on being a genuine person and connecting with people, they're going to do business with you. It's just going to come naturally. And one thing I saw was Nicki Minaj was tweeting out about all kinds of different things. And one of them was she was tweeting that she was going to pay for some tuition for some of her fans. And I thought that is absolutely incredible.
Right.
Like I'm not really a big fan of Nicki Minaj or her music. I think she's a little overrated in my opinion. But just by seeing that, I thought that was absolutely amazing. Now, I can imagine that this would transcend kind of down into the independent artists. I'm not saying that they have to pay for their fans' tuition because that can be incredibly expensive. But what are some things that independent artists could do for their fans where they can relate, where they're giving back? And how important is that? Or is it something that artists should be doing? Or is it something it's kind of give or take?
Yeah, and that's funny. I have a video coming out about this in a couple of weeks around Christmas about giving back to your fans. And, at the most basic level, it could be something as, quote unquote, trivial as a retweet, right? At the biggest, maybe it's paying tuition. One of my friends on Facebook, actually, gosh, I can't remember who the artist was. I want to say it was The Dream. He just happened to be on Twitter one night and said, hey, I feel like doing some good deeds for Thanksgiving. Comment why you deserve it. She ended up getting her tuition. She had like $6,000 of tuition that she owed before she can get her transcripts released from a school. And he paid it for her. I don't know how big of a Dream fan she was prior to, but you can believe now she's the biggest Dream fan ever. And that's the type of thing that can happen when you decide to acknowledge people and give back, out of the abundance that you now have been blessed with, and again, so it can be something as small as a retweet. I think in the news, Drake went to the hospital and visited a sick fan, and it's like things like that. It's just people remember those things.
Absolutely.
If I'm walking down the street and I drop my hat, and Denzel Washington picked it up and is like, oh, hey, man, you dropped this. I'm like, yo, Denzel Washington stopped, picked up my hat and handed it to me. I'm watching his next 10 movies. It's just, it's super important. Again, because every relationship counts. And you don't know what people are going through. We're in a really, rough time right now. People are being, persecuted for all sorts of reasons, whether it's their sexuality, whether it's their gender, whether it's their race. We're in a really divisive time. And so I think we kind of expect people to treat us badly. So when you turn around and do something good, you turn that idea on its head, and, there's nothing but good that can come from that.
Mm-hmm. Right. And I really wish I have a few ideas that I want to do for podcast ideas for things that I want to do. But paying it forward too, just doing simple things like a few months ago, I went to a convenience store and some homeless guy was sitting outside, and he said, "Hey man, I don't mean to bother you, but I'm really hungry. Do you mind if I get some food?" And I said, "Are you just looking for food?" Because sometimes if they want money, I don't usually give them money because then they turn around and they go buy alcohol or drugs or things like that. But he's like, "Yeah, I just want some food." So I said, "Come on in and I'll buy you a sub." So he came in, he got a sub, and he got something to drink. And I felt really good that day. And that guy, he thanked me, and he thanked me. He's like, "Oh, my friend ran off and I don't know where he went." And just paying it forward, helping people, because people have done it for me and I know how it feels and I'll never forget those moments.
Right.
So transcending it into an artist's perspective, those people are going to remember you, like you had said. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I'll definitely link that video that you're sharing in the show notes as well, because this episode will be out, I think in like middle of January. So it should be out by then. Cool. So you had mentioned that you are an author as well.
Yes.
What was the book that you had written?
I wrote a book, and it released back in July. It's called The Music Marketing Guidebook. It's how to find listeners, convert fans, and make more money with your music. And that's basically what it's about. Again, most people getting started in music are doing it because they love the music. Most artists are not necessarily, it's not that they're not good at business. A lot of artists have really good business minds. And the same creativity that you use in your business or to make music can be used in your business to help generate revenue and build a lifestyle that you can actually support financially. So I wrote the Music Marketing Guidebook just to help give some of that background information, like, hey, this is where you start. This is what marketing is. I know there are a lot of books about marketing. There's a lot of books about music marketing. And the problem that I see with a lot of them is, there's like two sides of the spectrum. On one hand, it's like every piece of marketing advice and information that you could ever think of in a 1,000,000-page book. And it's like, here you go. Let's figure it out, right? Mm-hmm. By the time you finish that book, you're like, I don't know where to start.
You gotta start all over again.
Exactly, because then that's the other thing. Information's outdated. Mm-hmm. Now, on the other end of that, you've got like these online courses and programs and stuff. And a lot of it is, and maybe they're well-intentioned, but they're written from this perspective that's like, hey, let me teach you these tactics so that you can make a lot of money tomorrow. And it's like, whether it's a course about Facebook ads or Instagram followers, like there's so many little quick tips. And the problem with that is they don't give you any type of foundational knowledge. So if you're reading a book about Facebook ads, then you don't really know the marketing, strategies behind that. If Facebook ads go away tomorrow, so do your business. Mm-hmm. So I wanted the Music Marketing Guidebook to be a really quick introduction to the principles of marketing, give you some strategy, or give you the underlying information, and then give you actionable steps that you can take so that you can see some results immediately, and those will get you started. And then if you want a deeper connection, you at least know what types of things to be looking for to move forward.
I think because the music industry, it's a lot of information, and you can become successful overnight. You can be successful in a week. Sometimes it takes 3 or 4 years, but how you approach that level is very important, and kind of figuring out a plan of action and then executing those steps is equally as important.
Right.
So in your opinion, do you think that musicians should have a level of business knowledge and marketing knowledge? Or do you think that they should kind of pawn it off onto people like you who really know how to market music, or a publicist or a label or whatever? in my opinion, I think everybody should have some, especially independent musicians, should have some level of marketing experience just so they don't get taken advantage of.
Right.
Somebody doesn't say, oh, yeah, this is going to be the best, when actually it's not the best scenario. It's only benefiting the artist manager or the label or whoever. So in your opinion, why do you think that business experience is important for an independent musician?
Yeah, and I totally agree with you. I think every artist, especially on an independent, from an independent standpoint, should have that business knowledge. I mean, saying that you're independent means that you're self-contained, and so you need to have the basic knowledge to run a business. Whether it's because, like for example, that song "Panda" that came out a couple years ago, the producer of that song sold the beat online for like $20. He had no idea at the time that Designer was going to get signed by Kanye West and that song was going to blow up the way it did, right? And I'm sure he's gotten his stuff straightened out now, but who knows how long it took him to see a dime from that song that generated millions of dollars in revenue. I went to a movie theater and saw Kanye West premiere that album that the song was on. And I'm like, anytime that music is being played, someone's generating revenue from it, And so it would suck to create something and not see any dime or any return from it. So I think all artists should have some aspect of knowledge of both the music industry, as an entity, but then also just general business savvy, in order, like you said, to not get taken advantage of. And we've all seen the movies. There are countless examples of artists who, we really look up to and revere, even to this day, who died penniless. There's no reason that James Brown should have died as early as he did. But he did because he was constantly touring, trying to make money, right? James Brown's been sampled more than any artist in history. James Brown shouldn't have to leave his house for less than $10 million, right? Like theoretically. But because of bad business practices and him being taken advantage of by people in the industry, he died the way he did, with his estate in turmoil and his family not really being able to fully profit off of him, And that's not the type of legacy you want to leave behind as an artist. Because, we're artists. We make music. We want to have a good time. But we're people, I have a family. Most of the artists that I work with have families. Even if they don't have children of their own, they've got cousins and people that they would love to pass things down to. And the music industry is full of people who are just not well-intentioned at all. And they are looking for every advantage or every opportunity to take advantage of you. And so because the industry is full of these sharks, it's best for you to be armed and equipped with knowledge.
Right. And I've over the last couple of years since graduating, I've learned that the hard way. I've been taken advantage of. People want free work when I've come to realize that my work is worth something. I have value for myself. I have bills I need to pay. I have things I need to save for, all kinds of stuff. And that's no different from any kind of independent musician. You shouldn't be writing music for a feature film for $20. That's absolutely not. You are absolutely worth more than that. If you can write music for a feature film, you have immense talent to do that, to do even that. That takes a lot of talent. So I think, like you had said, it's very important for that business knowledge to be kind of underlying. So a lot of artists, transitioning into the next thing, a lot of artists like to put all of their eggs in one basket. And I know that's a business no-no. And I haven't really experienced it because I don't have a lot of knowledge in it, but I have heard horror stories from numerous people and read blog posts and read books on how putting all of your eggs in a basket is one big no-no. So, for example, an artist thinks that I wrote this remix and I remixed this new pop culture meme thing and I spent $5,000 on Facebook ads. I'm going to be famous now. I'm going to be on the Ellen DeGeneres show. They're going to have me on the Today Show. When that's not true, why is that, especially in the music industry, why is putting your eggs in one basket kind of a no-no, and why can it be dangerous?
So, I mean, it's dangerous, I guess, most straightforward. It's dangerous just from a profit and loss standpoint. There's only so many times you can put a load of money into something, right? And some people have an advantage. Maybe they have an inheritance or they've got an insurance settlement. Who knows how you come into that kind of money, right? But let's say you got it the old-fashioned way. Most musicians are working, low wage jobs, because they feel like if they go for the higher skilled jobs, that'll take away from the time they have to be creative. So a lot of musicians are baristas, they're working at the copy shop, they're working in fast food, doing whatever they can to make ends meet. And those people working those wage jobs, it'll take you months and months to save the money required to run some of these PR campaigns, or like you said, to spend money on Facebook ads to try to make a meme go viral.
Yeah.
And it's like, if it doesn't work, well, for one, those chances are 1 in a million, right? Like, everyone is at least in some ways talented, but you never know what's going to happen with technology. People love to give that MySpace example. I don't know how relevant it is at this point because I don't think Facebook's going anywhere. But, Facebook's algorithm changes every month, even more often than that. So the things that worked yesterday to get someone else success may not work today. So if you put all your eggs in one basket, thinking about how, Justin Bieber got famous 6 months ago for doing this, I can replicate his idea and that can make me successful too. But you honestly have no idea. We're in the social media age. We see the end result a lot of times. We don't see the work and the process that goes into, the success that people see. And so right. If you're going to be misinformed, that's already, a strike against you. But then you put all of your eggs in that one basket and the basket falls, now you have no eggs. And who knows how long it'll take you to recover from that.
Right. And that's a really good point, actually, is how, you think technology is always changing. When you say technology, a lot of people think, like cell phones. Apple comes out with a new phone. They come out with a new device. Google comes out with a new phone every 6 months or a year. Samsung's got a new phone. But you also have to think about the things that run those technologies. The software, that also is a huge factor. Like you said, that Facebook ad or a Twitter ad, those things are cool and they work, but they may not work tomorrow. How so-and-so got famous on this and that may not work next week or next month. You might run it the exact same way. And that's why I kind of try to steer away from like the YouTube videos on how to run Facebook ads, because that video, sure, it was made a year ago or 6 months ago and it's still somewhat relevant, but the algorithms may have been tweaked a little bit. So that exact tactic is not working as well anymore. So I really like that you had mentioned that. That's a very important point, and I think a lot of people don't understand how important it is. And another thing you had said that I really enjoyed was it's okay to work as a barista to support your dreams. It's okay to work at a grocery store. It's okay to do that to funnel your money and support your dreams. Can you talk a little bit about that and why it's not a bad thing? Because you probably have more knowledge on it. You've managed artists that have done it and that have worked. You had one that quit her full-time job. Talk a little bit about why it's okay to do that.
Yeah, well, I mean, there are advantages to working, those
Right.
those type of shift wage jobs, and the biggest is that, if you're in that type of job, at the very least, you can change shifts with someone. If you get an opportunity to go, let's say there's a writing session happening, or there's a show that you want to perform at, and sound checks at 5. Oh, I don't get off till 6. Hey, Cindy, can you cover my shift? Yeah. In a salary position, that's not happening. If you don't have PTO, you're not leaving work, Right. And so it becomes this thing where it's conflicting with the lifestyle that you're trying to live right now conflicts with the lifestyle that you want to live in the future. But when you take one of those, quote unquote, low skilled jobs, again, it gives you the freedom, as long as you have a good relationship with your manager or your boss, it gives you that opportunity to go take advantage of whatever opportunities you may have in front of you. Obviously, there are downsides to that. You're not making as much money. running a successful music business today as an independent artist requires a lot more money than it may have 5 years ago. Things have gotten easier in some ways, but the price of admission is slowly rising. We're in the Spotify age. So now you've got to fight for attention, not only from the people in your hometown, but whenever your song does release, it's releasing right next to Jay-Z and Beyonce. And you've got to figure out how you're going to get people to pay attention to you instead of them. So all those things take money. They take a concerted effort. And a lot of times the salary that you get working, a barista job isn't enough to cover that. And so there's trade-offs either way. But again, I don't think there's anything wrong with it. If you have the passion, if you have the tenacity, if you are willing to learn and grow, then you can absolutely make it work. And doing it, the barista route is probably a better route for you in the long term, because reality is we spend ridiculous amounts of money on things we don't need, right? If you're working a $45,000 a year job, I guarantee you 80% of the money that you're spending right now is to keep up appearances. You've got a car payment. You've got cable, so you can say you watched all the latest shows. You've got, you got payments on furniture. Like, people buy dumb things that they don't need. But if you can find a way to live your life with the basics, like, look, I've got a place to sleep. I've got food to eat. And I don't care if 2 other people are living with me. That's fine, because I'm laser intently focused on my goal. And in a year, this won't be my situation anymore.
That's another good point as well. Is everybody they put these garbage ideas into people's heads, thinking that, oh, you're going to be making this much money and you're going to be making it in this amount, and then you're going to be driving Bentleys and Rolls Royces, and you're going to be having 6-bedroom mansions and 3 vacation homes. When in reality, is that really necessary? That's not really necessary. And I know I want to kind of come back to this because it's very important that if you're a musician, music is not your only sense of income. It's not. There are multiple other sources of income. In fact, from your music alone, there are over 900,000 ways of making money through royalties. There are from sync licensing, mechanical licensing, streaming, and the list goes on and on. But I'm sure you've talked about this in your book. What are some of the other couple 3 ways or a couple ways that musicians can make money aside from just writing music and releasing it on Spotify and Apple Music and SoundCloud?
Yeah, I was talking about this in the live stream the other day, because everyone's all up in arms about their Spotify Wrapped stats, right?
Yes.
Somebody got 1 million streams and I only got 5. Why? What's wrong with me? And I'm like, even if you got 1 million streams, Spotify is not paying your bills. 1 million streams will get you what? Maybe less than $500?
Actually, 1 million streams on Spotify is about $4,000.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's not bad at all.
But if you make 1 million streams in a year, divide 4,000 by 12 months. That's, that's barely paying an electric bill.
Right. Yeah, I think the stat I saw was if you sold 500 albums independently, out of the trunk of your car, that'd get you just as much money as 1 million streams on Spotify. And, I guess that works about out, let's say it's $10 an album. But yeah, anyway, Spotify's not going to be your main source of income. One, because the payments are so small when you're on that a small scale. Unless you're Drake and you're getting 1 billion streams a month, it's a huge chunk of your income. And then on the other side of that, it also takes a while for you to get those royalties in from your distributor. Even if you're in through DistroKid, it might take them 3 or 4 months to report those streams and for you to get that money. So what are you doing to make money in the meantime? Right? But there are so many other ways to make money, whether it's performing live. If you're performing live, even if you're just doing a door split, that's something. Let's say you perform twice a month, that's revenue. If you play an instrument, a great way to get paid is by giving lessons. No, that's not you, living your artist fantasies, but you're making a living with music, and that's more than a lot of people can say. What are some other ways? Yeah, like you said, sync licensing, especially for like EDM producers and things like that. Everyone thinks they've got to be the next Skrillex, but if you turn on a TV lately, there's all kinds of music being played on TV, and I'm sure you look at it like, I could do that, I could make that. It would take me about 15 minutes. And so as you're creating these tracks, you can be submitting them to music libraries. If your song gets placed, that's a bit of a long game as well, but you can get a sync fee up front. And those range anywhere from $1,000 to $5,000, depending on, what network you get placed with and how long that placement is. And if you're independent, it's easier for music supervisors to work with you. So that could be a month's rent right there, just that one placement. And then 9 months down the road, once ASCAP tracks, the performances, there's another royalty attached to that. And you'll keep getting paid as long as that's playing on TV or on the radio. So those are a few ways. But outside of Spotify, let's say merchandising. If if you're creative enough to write a song, then I'm sure some of your song lyrics are meaningful enough to be put on a t-shirt, or a hat or a mug. And you can set up a website right now for free and put up all these designs and sell those things with no upfront cost. And those can be a revenue stream for you. Drop shipping with your merchandise. So there are a lot of different ways to generate revenue, even from day one, even if you don't have a lot of money to spend up front.
So you had mentioned, I think this is important as well, you mentioned that merch can be sold for free. What are some of the resources to use for selling merch for free?
Yeah, so the website I use is called Printful. There are others. There's Printify. I think the other one's called Printfinity. There's a lot of different ones, but basically it's a print-on-demand service. So maybe you have a friend, or you can even put these designs up using like Canva, and you upload your design, and what they'll do is you can choose what kind of products you want that design on, whether it's a t-shirt, whether it's a hat, whether they have beach towels and all sorts of things. And what they'll do is they'll integrate with your website, and you can put those products on your website and offer them for sale. Obviously, Printful is going to charge you a certain amount to produce it, whether it might be $11 to $20 for a t-shirt. But on your side, you can add markup to that. So you can sell that $11 t-shirt for $20. So now when someone places an order on your website, you immediately pocket that $9. Printful then will send the shirt. They print the shirt up and send it directly to your fan without you ever having to touch anything.
And that's a method, for those who don't know, it's called drop shipping. And it's becoming very successful. I have a friend doing it right now, and he's starting to take some traction on it. And within the first day, he sold like $200 worth of stuff. He basically paid for his electric bill in one day. So it can be very, very plentiful, especially if you start building that relationship with your fans and actually having them, because there's nothing more that I love than buying a t-shirt from somebody who nobody knows about and wearing it, because I feel more exclusive.
Right.
I know this person and you don't. I feel kind of hipster.
Exactly.
And so thanks for those resources. I'll have to check them out myself, because definitely something I'll be looking into as well. Why should your merchandise be accessible, or should you have merchandise? Is it a necessity for all artists to have merchandise?
I think so, especially, I guess, depending on what level you're at, right? I guess you could argue that Beyonce doesn't need merchandise. But in today's industry where, music is largely looked at as a free resource, even though it still generates a lot of revenue, most people that interact with music don't have to pay to access it. And if they are paying, it's like a monthly fee that's really small. And so merchandise gives your fans the opportunity to prove their allegiance to you. Like you said, you love to wear an obscure band t-shirt and, kind of brag to your friends like, oh, you don't know who these people are yet, And that's something that most music fans have in common, But even beyond that, it's a way to build community. Because if I'm walking around, like I said, I've been a fan of Rhapsody for almost 10 years now. So if I'm walking around in my Rhapsody shirt and I see someone else with a Rhapsody shirt on, now we have something in common. We can build a friendship because we have this common experience. We both love this artist. And when you make sure you have merchandise that's accessible, you give your fans something to communicate and rally around. You know, that's why the Beehive is so successful. You know, I'm sure Beyonce could sell out stadiums no matter what. But there's something about her sending out that email or sending out like an obscure Instagram post and all those people getting on Twitter like, oh, the queen is about to come out. You know, it builds an excitement in ways that you can't really explain or quantify. You know, it's like, for example, I'm into sneakers. There's a Jordan sign behind my head, right? And Jordan releases these retros every Saturday, and most of them sell out. And they're like shoes that, you know, maybe Michael Jordan wore in a game or something like that. From the perspective of the Jordan brand, those shoes sell out anyway. It honestly doesn't matter. But they still choose to market them in a way where, like, if you're in the know, you know how special those shoes are. A couple years back, they switched from having colorways to having names or titles for shoes. So, for example, one was called the 72 and 10, and it was commemorating the season where the 96 Chicago Bulls set the preseason games won record, regular season. But the Warriors beat that. They went 73-9 a couple years back. But still, that's like, oh, this is the greatest team in history. Michael Jordan was on this, and it stokes excitement because you're excited around this story, not just, oh, it's not just shoes. You know, if you're a band, you're selling merchandise. It's a black T-shirt, it's a white T-shirt. You know, it's really minuscule in the grand scheme of things. But people can look at that and say, oh, you have a Ramones shirt on. I remember that song. I was at that concert in 79. I remember all these things. And it's just such a great experience. And if you're not offering that to your fans, they're really missing out.
Mm-hmm. And I've talked a little bit about it prior to this show, but also kind of getting creative with your merch. There's all kinds of different, like, there's a few businesses that hand out, you know, for example, flash drives, which is kind of, you know, kind of cliche, but there's all kinds of different things. Like maybe there's a Snuggie for a drink, or maybe it's a bumper sticker, or maybe it's a laptop case, or, you know, whatever the situation may be. Merchandise will sell as long as it's kind of unique and people can kind of show it off. Like when I buy a shirt, I'll buy a shirt so I can show it off. I don't buy a shirt so I can wear it around the house.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean,
go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, merchandise gives you an opportunity to just really reinforce what your brand is. For example, Wiz Khalifa is known for smoking weed or smoking something, right? Mm-hmm. Who knows?
Yeah, right.
Let's keep it safe. But Wiz Khalifa is known for smoking. If Wiz Khalifa comes out with a lighter with his face on it, that makes total sense, right? If you're a Christian rap artist and you have a lighter with your face on it, that doesn't really make sense.
No.
But, you know, if you're, like, again, if you're a fan of Wiz Khalifa, you're likely to smoke something. And, you know, you're likely to identify with that culture of going and buying like a glass pipe and things like that. So it makes total sense if Wiz Khalifa comes out with a line of items dedicated to that lifestyle. And again, it gives his fans something to rally around.
Right. And that's another good point, is be creative with your merch, but stay on brand, right? It don't come up with something that's not going to make any sense. Like if you, for example, like if you're a Christian rapper and you come out with, say, a Snuggie for drinking, well, that doesn't really make a lot of sense, you know, type of thing. So come up with things that are more associated with your brand and actually make sense and don't veer too far off. That's kind of a good point to end it, other than let's see how can people follow you? Where can people keep up with your information and stay up to date with what you're doing?
Yeah, so there's a lot of ways to stay connected. I'm on all social media at KDMR Music. KDMR stands for Keep Dreaming, Make Reality. It's a quote I saw online somewhere, and I just loved it. So KDMR Music everywhere. youtube.com/KDMR Music, and my blog. It's blog.kdmrmusic.com. I'm sure Lennon's going to link to all those things in the show notes. A couple of things I've got going on. Again, the Music Marketing Guidebook is available now. It's $19.99, but again, we start out in part 1. We teach you the basics of marketing and how it applies to music. In part 2, we talk about online marketing, whether it's Facebook ads or building your website, things like that. Part 3, we talk about marketing in the real world. So reaching out to press and promoters and performing live shows and how to, get booked for more events. And then in part 4, we bring it all together and talk about, setting up a music marketing plan for an album release or for an album launch and things like that. So basically all the things that we've talked about in this conversation today are wrapped up pretty neatly in that book. And you can purchase that at musicmarketingguidebook.com.
Cool. I will, like Brandon said, I will put all of that information in the show notes below so you guys can easily access it. I just want to thank you so much for being on the show. I really appreciate it. You have a lot of good information and even put some of the things I was thinking about into perspective, some things I not really thought about. So thank you for all your time and your information.
Oh, no problem, man. Thanks again for having me.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you very much for tuning in to this week's episode of When Life Hands You Lemons. I very much hope that you enjoyed my conversation with Mr. Brandon Jackson. As you can tell through our conversation, Brandon is very passionate about the music business and his clients and his business as well. So as I had mentioned earlier in the introduction of this episode, Brandon has provided me with a coupon to provide all of you if you're interested in purchasing his music marketing guidebook. If you enter the code LENNON, LENNON, you will get 50% off the book. And of course, the link and this information will be in the show notes below as well. So if you're interested in purchasing Brandon's book, it kind of goes through walking through the entire marketing book for musicians, marketing steps, I should say, for musicians. This is definitely a book for you if you're interested. Also, please make sure that you sign up to the mailing list, which is also in the show notes below. It helps me grow the podcast as well as notify you on when new episodes are live and provide you with tips and tricks on the music industry and music business. Please be sure to support me on Patreon, as the money that I make through Patreon will go directly into the podcast to help support it and make it better for all of you. Additionally, I would encourage you to please rate this podcast in Apple Podcasts or whatever platform you use to listen to the show on, as it greatly helps this podcast grow and help it be discovered by new listeners. Also, and lastly, there is a guest request form. So if you or somebody you know would be a good guest for the show, please fill out this form so that I can get into contact with this person or you and potentially have them on the show, as I'm always looking for new and exciting guests to share their knowledge and experience within the music business with all of you. Again, I want to say thank you very much for listening to the show, and I hope that you enjoyed this episode with Mr. Brandon Jackson. We will see you next week on the 13th episode of When Life Hands You Lemons.